All right, today we're opening the file on a really common but often misunderstood health threat, viral hepatitis. Think of this as your essential intelligence briefing on a group of viruses that target one of our most important organs.
Okay, so let's get right down to it. What are we even talking about? Well, at its core, hepatitis is simply an inflammation of the liver. You can think of your liver as the body's master chemical plant, right? It's a filter, it's a factory, and when it gets inflamed, its entire operation can grind to a halt.
Now that inflammation, it can be triggered by a few things. Alcohol, certain drugs, toxins, but today we're zeroing in on the biggest cause around the globe, an actual invasion by a virus.
So let's start by popping the hood and really understanding what happens inside your body when one of these viral agents decides to launch an attack.
So here's how it goes down. First, the virus gets in and starts taking over the liver cells. This kicks off a huge inflammatory response from your body. The liver starts to swell up, it gets congested, and that actually distorts its internal plumbing. This can squeeze those tiny channels that carry bile, causing it to back up into your bloodstream. And that's what leads to jaundice, that classic yellowing of the skin and eyes. And this is a really crucial point. The infection can go one of two ways. It can be a short-term fight, what we call an acute illness, that your body eventually wins. But if that inflammation just keeps going for more than 6 months, it becomes a chronic problem. And that's a whole different ballgame. It's a long-term battle that can lead to some serious damage, like scarring of the liver, that's cirrhosis, and even liver cancer.
Okay, so let's profile the main culprits you really need to know about. We're going to focus on the big three: hepatitis A, B, and C.
First up, we've got hepatitis A. We can call this one the contaminator. It's a really tough little virus that spreads through, well, the fecal-oral route, basically through contaminated food or water. It usually causes a milder, kind of flu-like illness. And the good news? It does not turn into a chronic infection.
Next, hepatitis B, or the insider. This virus is a bit different. It's transmitted through infected bodily fluids. We're talking mainly blood and semen. So, the most common ways it spreads are through things like unprotected sex, sharing needles, or even from an infected mother to her baby at birth. And this one can definitely become a chronic problem.
And finally, there's hepatitis C, which we'll call the silent saboteur. This one spreads pretty much exclusively through blood-to-blood contact, with sharing needles being the #1 risk. And what's so dangerous about Hep C is that most people who get it have zero symptoms for years, even decades, all while the virus is just silently tearing up their liver.
So, understanding the differences between them is absolutely critical, and this chart just lays it all out perfectly. Look at the key distinctions here. Hep A, food and water, no chronic risk. B and C, body fluids and blood, and they both carry that serious risk of becoming chronic. And check out that last row, the vaccine column. We have fantastic vaccines for A and B, but not for C. That's a huge deal.
We should also give a quick mention to hepatitis D and E. Hepatitis D is pretty fascinating. It's like a sidekick virus. It's defective, so it actually needs hepatitis B to be around in order to replicate. And hepatitis E is a lot like A. It's a waterborne infection that's more common in other parts of the world, and it usually clears up on its own.
Okay, so now that we've met the agents, how would you even recognize an attack? Let's move on and decode some of the common warning signs.
A lot of the early symptoms can be really tricky. Things like fatigue, nausea, muscle pain. You could easily just think you have the flu. But the major red flags, the ones that really point a finger at the liver, are things like jaundice, really dark-colored urine, and stools that are distinctly light or clay-colored. That, often along with some pain in the upper right part of your belly, is a big sign.
Okay, this brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most important part of this whole briefing: the countermeasures. What can you actually do to defend yourself? What are the key strategies for prevention and treatment?
And if you want to understand the stakes, just look at this number. An estimated 58 million people around the world are living with chronic hepatitis C. Just hepatitis C alone. That is a staggering number of people, especially for a disease that is so often silent and in many cases preventable.
Because hepatitis C can be asymptomatic for so long, and because it was often spread through things like blood transfusions before we had good screening back in 1992, there's a very specific recommendation for baby boomers to get a one-time test. So many people in this group could be infected and have absolutely no idea.
So for the contaminator, hepatitis A, your best defense is pretty straightforward. First, the vaccine is incredibly effective, especially if you plan on traveling. After that, it really just comes down to good old-fashioned hygiene, washing your hands, and just being careful about food and water in high-risk areas.
When we're talking about the insider, hepatitis B, the vaccine is an absolute game changer. It's usually given as a series of shots, and it offers amazing protection. You back that up with smart practices, like using condoms, and never, ever sharing personal items that could have blood on them.
Now, for the silent saboteur, hepatitis C, we have to remember the key fact. There is no vaccine. That means prevention is everything. It all boils down to avoiding blood-to-blood contact. Period. That means not sharing needles or any drug equipment and being really careful with personal stuff like razors or toothbrushes.
But here's the amazing news. For people who do get infected, especially with chronic B or C, the game has totally changed. This quote here really gets at the goal of modern medicine. We have these powerful new antiviral drugs that don't just manage the virus. They can often completely eradicate it, stopping it dead in its tracks before it can cause things like cirrhosis or cancer.
So as we wrap up this briefing, here's the final thought to leave you with. We now have this incredible arsenal of tools, right? We have powerful vaccines for A and B, and we have treatments that can literally cure hepatitis C in most people. Which leads us to a really powerful and, honestly, hopeful question for the future. With this knowledge and with these tools, could we be the generation that finally defeats this silent global threat?